In today's episode, we speak with Josh Ritter of Courtroom Confidential, and Josh brings his expertise of being a prosecutor and a defense attorney to the table today. We mostly speak about the disappearance of Emmanuel Haro from Cabizon, California in August of 2025, but we do sprinkle in a little bit about the legal proceedings following Charlie Kirk's assassination. Lance, what'd you think of this conversation?
Well, you know that I love having people on who become instant new friends of the show. And not only did that happen with Joshua, but he also was able to show us how much knowledge he has in these developing stories that are happening in the crime world, like current stories like Charlie Kirk's assassination, like the disappearance, the abduction, possible murder of Emmanuel Haro. He is telling us about where these cases are at, what their status is. We even got a little bit into Luigi Mangione and where his trial is at now and how that assassination compares to the one that was perpetrated by Tyler Robinson. So we get this from this perspective, this legal perspective, but also this media perspective. And I don't know about you, Tim, but I walked away learning a lot more about all three of these current developing cases than I ever thought I would have.
Absolutely. Really interesting stuff from Joshua. So we really appreciate him coming on the show and joining us to tell us about these cases. And you can follow Courtroom Confidential on YouTube at CR Confidential. He's also got a podcast out there on Spotify or YouTube. And you can check out the website at thecourtroomconfidential.com.
And hey, as long as you're out there perusing the internet, why don't you follow us at Missing CSM? Give us a 5-star rating, give us a good review. Hey, if you can get 6 stars in there, give us 6 stars. All right, we're going to break real quick for a commercial. We'll be right back with new friend of the show, Joshua Ritter.
Welcome to the podcast, Josh Ritter of Courtroom Confidential. How are you today?
I'm very good. Thank you so much for having me. I've been looking forward to this.
Yeah, we've been looking forward to it as well. We were back-to-back at CrimeCon and only managed to introduce ourselves on the last day, and lucky for us we did, because you have such a cool crew and your show is amazing, and you're now on the show. So this has been a great moment. We always think that CrimeCon is a really productive time, and that this is the result of that, like, productiveness of CrimeCon. But there's probably a couple people who don't know who you are. So do you mind introducing yourself, a little background?
Sure. Well, thank you so much for the kind words. And yeah, I'm so glad we ran into each other at CrimeCon. CrimeCon was wild. I thought I would have way more time to kind of go and visit with more people and see speakers, and I had zero time whatsoever with just manning our own booth. We were there for the first time and then just doing whatever other kind of busy work we had to do. So I feel like it flew by, but I'm so glad that we did get a few minutes to touch base. I was a prosecutor with the LA District Attorney's Office for just over 10 years. Really enjoyed that job. It was the best career I ever had. I mean, I really thoroughly enjoyed it, but I did leave eventually because end of the day, it's government work. And as much as I enjoyed public service, I had other kind of ambitions in life. And not going to lie, money was part of the deal. They do not pay you all that much at the DA's office. And I left, went into private practice as a criminal defense attorney. And I've been doing that for going on 10 years now. So I've spent my entire professional career as a lawyer in one aspect of the criminal law world. And I enjoy thoroughly being a criminal defense attorney as well. It's not what I had originally expected. I kind of went through a lot of mental gymnastics in my head about leaving the DA's office, thinking that how in the world could I switch sides? But it wasn't really as you might expect. And I thoroughly enjoy it. And now this whole media world has opened up. So I've got, like you said, the YouTube channel and the podcast and a bunch of other stuff, spinning plates we've got going. And but I'm enjoying it. Very, very happy.
working for both sides, defense and prosecution, kind of makes you uniquely qualified to dive into the media world and host a show like you're hosting now.
I hope so. And that's kind of the mission statement of the channel, is that we want to be as objective as possible and present both sides of every case as much as possible. I mean, I certainly have opinions on the guilt of some folks, but I try to say, hey, but from the defense perspective, this is what they're going to do, and this is what the jury is going to pay attention to. But yeah, I try to mix in my experience from both sides as much as possible.
And why is that? We have had a number of people on who are former lawyers, whether they're prosecutors or defense attorneys. They will start a podcast, they will have their YouTube channel, and they seem to really, really enjoy the knowledge that they have acquired over their education and their experience in the field. They seem to really enjoy talking about that, and the audience really enjoys it too. And I'm wondering, like, what... You kind of answered it there, but in your perspective, what's the importance of taking all of that and not just putting it into like a 3-minute segment that might be featured on the news or something, but your long form podcast, YouTube content creation? There's all of this time that you're filling with all of this information. In your eyes, what is important about that?
It's funny. I have a very good friend. You may know him. His name's Matt Murphy. He was also a prior...
He is such a son of a bee.
He was a former prosecutor as well in Orange County. When I was in LA County, he was in Orange County. He's a phenomenal lawyer. He did the same thing. He left. He went into private practice. He's doing a bunch of media stuff. He doesn't have a podcast yet, though I keep on bugging him about it. But I was talking to him about all of that question you just asked. And he said, it's kind of like we spend our careers being vacuum repairmen, and we know everything there is to know about vacuums. And our whole career, nobody seemed to really care. We're just quietly doing our work. And then imagine all of a sudden, people become obsessed with vacuums. And you've got podcasts about vacuums, and people want to call you to speak at conventions about vacuums. And it's like they're doing documentaries about vacuums. So that's the way we both felt. I mean, we spent our entire careers doing trials to completely empty courtrooms for the most part, where nobody's covering this case in the news. Nobody's covering it in the newspapers. They're incredibly important cases, but they just fall under that radar. And then now with... And I say the rise of true crime, though it's been around for decades, it does seem like it's just becoming more and more popular every year. People, podcasts are all over the place, and YouTube channels, and people really enjoy it. And so it's what I've been doing my whole career. It's something that I enjoy. It's something I have a lot of experience in. And now people thoroughly enjoy it too. And so as much as I can sprinkle in not just my reaction to it, or isn't that shocking, and kind of the gossipy side of true crime, as much as I can kind of, hey, this is what's going on here legally, and why are they able to prove this, and why is that attorney making that argument, and why did the judge rule the way he did? That's very fulfilling to me, and people eat it up. People really love to know kind of how the sausage is made, and I'm happy to do that.
Love the vacuum cleaner analogy.
Yeah, that's a fantastic analogy. Yeah, it's really well done. I do appreciate your approach on your podcast. And I noticed that you covered the Charlie Kirk shooting and a little bit about the alleged shooter, Tyler Robinson. Can you tell us a little bit about what Tyler Robinson is facing as far as criminal proceedings?
Yeah, I think an important thing to understand is that charging someone with capital murder, meaning a murder that exposes them to the death penalty, if that jurisdiction has that, and Utah does, it's more than just saying, hey, this is a horrible crime and this is a murder and we want to get the death penalty. There are specific statutes in each state outlining different aggravating factors that have to be proven by the prosecution in order to even make that crime eligible for the death penalty. So we were all wondering, what is we heard the governor in Utah saying they intend to pursue the death penalty. We heard that that's what the prosecutor's office was intending to do. They call it aggravated murder in Utah. That makes a first-degree murder something special. and making it eligible for the death penalty. And we were all wondering kind of under what theory they were going to do that. So you have to look through the statute, and I learned more about Utah law than I ever thought I would, and scoured that entire statute. And there are dozens of aggravating factors, and none of them seem to apply except for one. And that one aggravating factor is that the crime, the murder, was committed while putting other people's lives at risk. And you can see a fairly straightforward argument for that. And that is, in fact, what the prosecution did allege. So they're saying that by assassinating Charlie Kirk and the shooting being committed with people to his left and to his right, in front and behind him in close proximity, that's putting other people at risk, making it an aggravated murder, and then making it eligible for them to pursue the death penalty, which they have. So that's where things stand right now, is that the state of Utah has charged Tyler Robinson with aggravated murder, and they have already indicated their intent to pursue the death penalty. They've also charged him with several other crimes, but I mean, that those are all kind of tail wagging the dog when it comes to that aggravated murder charge.
Do you think that a lot of the media has delivered that piece of information? Because I was not aware that there needed to be criteria, and even what that criteria is when you have to apply the death penalty to a crime.
No. And I don't know if that's the fault of the media or if they just getting into the weeds of it takes up too many paragraphs in a news story, because you do need to kind of understand a little bit about the law and how it works. But yeah, I mean, for the most part, the media, I think they do a good job of hitting the highlights of different things, but I don't remember an article explaining it the way that I just explained it to you, which was important to us lawyers, but maybe not all that important to the general media consuming population.
I think it's a perfect example of the answer that you gave about the vacuum cleaner and all of a sudden people being super into vacuums. Like, there isn't that space in the coverage on regular media or in print media. Like you said, it takes up too much space to add these things that people might not be interested in, but you can't know until you put it out there. And that's the purpose of your show. That's the purpose of the shows that we're talking about, is that you have 30, 40 minutes, sometimes an hour, and you can really get into it. I just love that. I love that most people had no idea. Now they do.
And I think that's such an excellent point. I feel like sometimes the media assumes the level of interest, curiosity, and intelligence even of their consumers. And I have found that people are really hungry for that type of information and for those deep dives. And, forums like yourself with a podcast, you can go in depth to these things. On YouTube, you can go in depth, and you're not losing viewers. I mean, the people really eat it up. I say all the time that I feel like we have the smartest community on YouTube, because I'll get questions from viewers and subscribers, and they're very good. They're not superficial. They're asking like law school level stuff about things, and it comes from a pure place of curiosity. They want to know, hey, the Donna Adelson case was a case that was dominating headlines for the last few weeks. They want to know, what is use immunity? How does use immunity works? What does that mean that Wendy Adelson got granted use immunity? Can they prosecute her? Can she say, I committed the crime, and then they can't prosecute her? These are, this is not day one of law school. This is like really getting into the weeds on some of these issues, and people are fascinated by it. They can appreciate it, they can understand it, and they want more of it.
Right. Now, you've been covering Luigi Mangione's case as well. And is that similar to the journey that Tyler Robinson is facing as far as facing the death penalty, or does one of them have a better chance than the other?
Great question. So they're similar, and then they're also very different. First of all, they're similar on a very chilling respect as far as the similarities in the way that the crime was committed, the etchings on the bullet casings. It's really disturbing to me that it does look like Robinson was inspired in part, at least, by Mangione. I say Mangione, you say Mangione. I'm not quite sure which one's right, but correct me if I'm wrong. But as far as how they got to the death penalty, what's happening in the Mangione cases, the state of New York does not have the death penalty. So the state of New York charged him with first-degree murder. Again, in order to even get to first-degree murder in New York, you need some sort of aggravating factor. And in that case, they charged him with murder committed in the furtherance of terrorism. Recently, the judge threw that out, tossed the terrorism allegations. So his crime in the state of New York was reduced from first degree to second degree, which is no small thing. For first degree in New York, you're looking at life without parole. For second degree, you're looking at as little as 15 years to life. So big win for the defense, big loss for the prosecution on the state level. There's a parallel prosecution on the federal level because they allege committed the act of stalking the healthcare CEO across state lines. They've alleged stalking and murder in the course of stalking. So they're able to charge murder under a federal statute and with a weapons charge, turn that into a murder that's eligible for the death penalty. So for the federal prosecution, they're pursuing the death penalty. On the state side of things, even if they convict him of everything, he's looking at it as much as 15 years to life.
This is a more of an opinion question on my end, and I know I don't want to get anyone in trouble with the answer on this, and I don't think it's going to get anyone in trouble, but what is the purpose of the etchings on in your opinion, the purpose of the etchings on the shell casings, other than to send a message? I don't know. What is the purpose of that?
Yeah. Well, in the Mangione case, I think it's pretty clear cut. I mean, I believe they were deny, delay, depose. And he was targeting a healthcare CEO. We have his kind of notebook manifesto. He obviously was targeting the healthcare industry, and he had his political reasons for that. In the Tyler Robinson case, it becomes far less clear. And these etchings all kind of relate to internet memes and this kind of internet culture. And it seems like the more we learn about him, he was very steeped in the internet world. He was a part of these Discord chats. I know Discord. I'm not all that familiar with it, but I know it's a place where you can kind of create communities around a certain subject and chat with people. And apparently he was very involved in that. But it is incredible to me and also chilling to me that here's a person who's going to go out and commit a murder that he knows is going to get a public reaction. He's going to do it in a very public place. And the message he chooses to leave on these bullets is not some quote from Karl Marx, from Che Guevara, from even the Bible. It's weird internet culture. I mean, I don't know if that means he's got a very disturbed mind or if he took this whole thing to be a joke in a game or whatever it was, but you would think he was sending some sort of message, but I'm completely lost on what that message is. We do know, though, from his parents, from the roommate who's also his romantic partner, that he was becoming more kind of radicalized politically, and that was probably a motive behind it because he hated Charlie Kirk for his political messaging.
Well done. Thank you for explaining that. And
I think all of us, we have safe jobs still. Okay.
Did we get through that? Did I navigate that well enough?
You steered us through.
Very difficult topic these days, yes.
And we'll be right back after a quick word from our sponsors.
Thanks to our sponsors, and now we're back to the program. We have been covering the case of the disappearance of Emmanuel Haro from Cabizon, California. And this is a story we have been watching closely ever since it was reported that he had been kidnapped by his parents. And then, of course, they did interviews, a lot of internet speculation that the parents weren't telling the truth. About a week later or a few days later, they were arrested. And the updates have slowed down since then. We did see some images of Jake, Emmanuel's father, searching alongside a highway. But doesn't seem like there's been much news in the case since then. So, yeah, can you tell us a little bit about this case and what the heck's going on from your POV?
Sure. First off, I think we all kind of knew from the moment that press conference took place. I got a pit in my stomach. There was something about it. It just seemed incredibly off. I wanted it to not be true, but the second I saw that press conference, I thought this kid's dead. This kid is gone. The story didn't make sense. She says she was going to Big Five. She was in the parking lot, a sporting goods store. Somebody comes up from behind and attacks her. She loses consciousness, can't remember anything, wakes up, and her child is gone. Beautiful little baby boy. And now they're searching for him and they're asking for the public. And I remember even during the press conference, the father, Jake, the mother's name is Rebecca. The father, Jake, is holding up this piece of paper that he had printed out that was like a help us sign. And it said missing kid. And I just remember thinking, like, this is just so pathetic and so off, and nothing about this rings true. Well, to our suspicions, they find out soon enough that none of it starts to fit together. The story for why the mother was even at the Big Five makes no sense, doesn't line up with anything else. I think they start pulling surveillance and the timing. Nothing's fitting together. So they go back, and the parents had initially been cooperative. They go back and they start to confront them with these inconsistencies, and all cooperation shuts down. And then somewhere along the lines, and there have been mixed reports about this, and I know that initially there was a report that he may have, the father, confessed to another inmate, and I believe that since then that's been reported as not being accurate. But somewhere along the lines, it does appear as though law enforcement hears from him that the child is dead, and that they had something to do with it. And I don't know if that's a flat out confession or what, but we can assume as much given the fact that he was cooperating with investigators and they were searching an area and didn't come up with any remains. So I don't know the latest on that and why they weren't able to recover a body, but the Riverside DA, his name is Mike Hestron, says that they still have a strong indication as to where the baby's remains may be. So it sounds like they're still trying to search. Anyhow, then since then, they've been charged with murder, both Rebecca and Jake, and we've learned, I think, most disturbing to me, certainly as a former prosecutor, is to learn of the criminal history of Jake. And the DA, Mike Hestron, gave a press conference. And I will tell you, when you're in the prosecutor's office, they really put the fear of God into you as far as what you say to the media. They're very concerned about being very careful in choosing your words in the media. You'll hear most prosecutors, if they say anything, they say, we're going to leave the facts to speak for themselves in court. But he laid into the prior judge who had handled a case involving the father really heavily. Like, you do not see that all that much. And I applaud him for that because I think it was rightfully so. So the father had been arrested for a case from 2018 involving a child he had, a daughter from another marriage. And he took a plea deal in 2023. Here's what we know. I've not pulled the files, but here's what we know from what's been reported and from the DA's office, is that he, again, a young child, I mean, below the age of 1, I think at the time, fractured her ribs, fractured her skull, and left her with a brain hemorrhage that she is described as permanently disabled and bedridden to this day. The judge, over the objections of the prosecutor, gave him probation for that. 6 years suspended, meaning 6 years of prison, but suspending the time so he doesn't serve it, and 4 years probation. That is appalling to me. That is shocking, I think, to anybody. I don't care if you've lived your life in this world or not. That's just shocking. And it was over the the prosecution's objections, and this current DA Hestrin was like, that is why this child is dead now. Had he been in prison and had he done the time he should have done, he would not have been out to commit the crime that he committed here. So as far as where things are right now, that is just part of the explanation, but really doesn't play a role in the progress of this current case. I'm sure that prior conviction will come up in the trial if this goes to trial. But where things are right now is it's just working its way through the system. And so the idea that we haven't learned all that much more is probably going to be true for a while until we get to something like the preliminary hearing where we'll start to get more evidence about it. The only other thing I'll add, and then I'll stay quiet, is that I know there has been reports about them trying to pursue some sort of plea agreement, even this early on. In cases where there's a missing body, sometimes that is the only leverage that the defense may have. And I can imagine a situation where if they explain what happened and where the baby's remains are, that the prosecutor's office might offer them something short of like a first degree murder. But I still think we'd be talking about decades in prison.
It's really one of those stories that is almost difficult to talk about because of that prior conviction that he had and the damage that he caused to this other child. I think, yeah, you were right. Just under a year. I think it was 10 months old, I think. But absolutely astonishing that the judge came down with that decision. And I wanted to get your opinion on why that decision was made, according to something that we read that Jake had said, that he pled guilty to that he wasn't actually guilty, but he pled guilty because he couldn't afford to go to trial. And his lawyer, this individual named Vincent Hughes, who I think is defending him today for this. I'm not sure if he's still on his team, his defense team, but he's also been described as his spokesperson. This is a multifaceted question. Sorry, it comes from a place of frustration in me because I'm just confused. And how do you do that as a lawyer? How do you quote somebody a number for your services, and when that person says, I can't afford to go to trial, and then your advice is, okay, well, then you're going to have to take a plea here. You're going to have to plead guilty. And then it happens again. Mm. How are you still their spokesperson? How are you still right, even in the conversation with this person?
Yeah. Well, let's first try to figure out why this happened. The criminal court system, especially in a place like Los Angeles, I know this was in Riverside, but it's still part of kind of the greater Los Angeles area. They're always kind of overwhelmed, and you've got case after case after case, and these judges are under constant pressure to clear up their docket. So the idea of what's called getting an open offer. You can, at any point, go to the judge. If you feel like plea negotiations have shut down with the DA's office, the defense attorney can go to the judge and go, Your Honor, what will you give us? The prosecution won't give us what we're asking for, probation, whatever it is. What will you give us? And the judge can look through and give you an offer. And sometimes they'll back what the DA says. Most times they will, in fact. Other times they'll undercut the DA to some extent because they feel like, it's in the interest of justice. It might be the right thing to do. They might feel like the DA's hands are handcuffed a bit and they're trying to move things along. They've got to deal with plenty of cases. When you do that, you're pleading to what's called the sheet, meaning you plead to everything you've been charged with. A judge can change the offer, but a judge can't change what you're actually charged with. What we've learned since then is that the DA's office holds a little bit of responsibility in this because what they charged him with made him eligible for probation. They could have added other allegations to make him ineligible for probation, but they didn't at the time he was charged. So the defense attorney at that time saw an opportunity and said, hey, judge, they won't give us probation. What he's charged with is eligible for probation. Will you give us probation? Now, there's where my kind of, seeing both sides of this ends when it comes to this judge, because at that point, the prosecution stood up and said, Your Honor, you can't do this. These are the injuries. It was a young child. This is horrific. we're going to amend our complaint at some point. Please don't offer this. And most judges, you're dealing with a case where a child has been injured. They're going to stop right there and say, nope, not undercutting the DA on this one. We're not talking about some sort of property crime. We're talking about a crime of violence against a child. This judge did not. This judge went ahead and gave that offer to the defense. And, now we're where we sit now. As far as his statement that he didn't go to trial because he didn't have the money, I don't know how much I put into that. I think he didn't go to trial because he got a sweetheart deal. He got a deal that kept him out of prison. I mean, I know anybody would take that. They're not going to go try to risk that at trial. That's what the prosecution would have loved for him to chose at that time. And as far as his defense attorney, I mean, the guy's doing his job. We may not like the ugly consequences of it, but at the time he took advantage of this opportunity to get his client a good deal, and he did that. Why he's sticking around now and acting as his spokesperson, I'm not going to judge him. I don't know him, but it certainly is a very ugly case. As a private attorney, I get this question all the time. How do you represent those people? Well, as a private attorney, I have the luxury of turning down a lot, and I do. I mean, I'm very selective about the types of cases I take because of those reasons. There's just some stuff that I don't feel like I could put my entire self behind it. But everybody deserves a lawyer. Everybody deserves a defense.
Thanks. Wow, that question's been bugging me for a long time, and you just really buttoned it up on all angles. So
Good.
Thanks.
Glad to hear that.
And we'll be right back after a quick word from our sponsors.
Thanks to our sponsors, and now we're back to the program. Earlier in the investigation, before the parents were arrested, the investigating agency moved they moved it to a specialized investigations division. We had kind of speculated that maybe that was a situation where there was a domestic incident going on inside the house, but so it was more complicated than just a straightforward investigation. Were we barking up the right tree with that, or what do you know about that?
I think you are correct. I don't know how Riverside Sheriff has been handling this, or the Riverside DA, but I can go off just my experience from Los Angeles County is that in a case like this would definitely be assigned to a special unit, and both on the investigatory and prosecution level, because you are dealing with, first of all, I know it's a no-body murder right now. That's going to require a lot of really skilled and experienced investigators and prosecutors to handle that. Then it's in case involving violence against a child. Again, going to require specialized experience and knowledge on that. And it's also high profile. So they're just going to want to make sure that they've got this all buttoned up and they have their best people investigating it and their best people prosecuting it. We know very little. So it's hard for me at this point to tell you how strong of a case it is. I think it is a fairly strong case, just given no one else had this child with them. She's the last person to have, admittedly been with this child. The child's gone. The child's missing. It's not like children of that age get up and walk away. So it's not like we're all thinking this is a runaway situation. The child is obviously, I think, we can assume dead at this point, tragically. So I think they're going to be able to piece this whole thing together. But there is going to be that complication of no body, no autopsy, no cause of death that they can testify to. Even though we know that it's funny, the prosecution has said that they believe this child died after systematic abuse. And I don't know where they're getting that information from, unless it's from someone close to the family who may have witnessed some of this over a period of time.
And we did say that there hasn't been a lot of updates on his whereabouts or the status of the situation with the parents and the legal system. And one of the latest updates was that they appeared in court. And I'm wondering if they appear in court together or do they appear in court separately? And what is the process at this stage? What are they appearing in court for?
Yeah, great question. So they are charged together. They will likely be tried together and make every court appearance together. They will have separate counsel, different attorneys, and we'll get into why that is and why that's important in a little bit. But right now, We're at the pre-prelim stage. In California, when you're charged with a felony, the first big watershed moment is your preliminary hearing. So you get arrested, you're charged and arraigned for a crime, and then it might be set out several months, especially in a case of this magnitude. It might go several months before you get to your prelim. And a prelim is the first opportunity for a judge to hear what evidence exists in the case. It's a probable cause hearing. So the standard of proof is much lower than trial. There's no jury present. It's only a judge, but a judge doesn't know any of the evidence at this point. The judge presiding over this case just knows what they're charged with, but doesn't know what evidence there is to back that up. So for the first time, they will bring in witnesses, and they will probably present people like investigators, whatever forensic evidence they've recovered, whatever witnesses. They might call in actual witnesses to some of this that are going to testify at trial, and they put them all on. They're cross-examined by the defense, and then the judge makes a decision on whether or not there's enough evidence to hold this person to answer for trial. But getting to that point in a case of this seriousness, like I said, can take months because the investigation is still kind of ongoing. And they're still turning over evidence to the defense. So the defense is going to be wanting to ask for more time. Interesting to me in this case, when you've got two defendants, even when they're married, I would not be surprised if they start pointing the finger at each other immediately. I would not be surprised if, and that's why they're going to have separate attorneys. If Rebecca says, well, he's always been the violent one. He beat our poor baby to death and I had to cover for it. And I'm afraid of him because he beats me too. I don't know, but I could easily see that being a defense. Or him turning the finger on her. I only covered for her. She did this. She's awful, whatever it is. In spite of that, they will probably try to sever their cases away from each other because there's strength in having them tried together for the prosecution. But I don't see a judge buying those arguments. I think they will be tried together with separate attorneys, and their defenses will probably be implicating the other person.
Wow, really interesting stuff. Yeah, definitely have been kind of expecting them to, I guess, I don't know, go at each other at some point. But yeah, it was a little surprising that we hadn't seen that to this point. Now, you mentioned that authorities stated that they believe they have a good idea of where Emmanuel is. That strikes me as odd in that he's still out there, but they know where he is. Why hasn't he been recovered if that's true?
I wondered the same thing. Again, that DA Mike Hestron, this is a quote from him, says, "We have a pretty strong indication of where the remains of baby Emmanuel are." I'm guessing they must be getting that from the father. But then it's strange to me that they went out and searched and couldn't recover anything. So I don't know if that's because father has direct knowledge of where the baby was left or was told by mother where the baby was left. It could be. But for him to go out and say that, again, prosecutors are so tight-lipped and careful with what they say. For him to say that leads me to believe that he must have some idea of where the remains are. But we've now, we're more than a few weeks out, and we still haven't heard any word of them recovering the body. I'm going to say one other thing on this, and it's a little graphic, but it's true. I mean, you're talking about areas of Riverside can be nearly desert and desolate, and there are wild animals out there, and perhaps a body disposed in that area could have been wild animals could have gotten to it, and there could be basically essentially nothing left at this point.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's kind of where my thinking was going as well, is that the attempt was made to find the body, but they just got there too late before the elements and the wildlife got to it. Yeah, poor kid. And even his daughter. If you, I don't know if it's right or wrong, but there are pictures of her out there now. And there are pictures of her when she was beaten in the hospital too, and it's repulsive. So
I am telling you, like I said, I've been very frustrated over my career with judges doing things that on both sides. But as a prosecutor, I've seen plenty of times where I felt like a judge undercut me, and it's frustrating, and you try to do everything you can to prevent it. I mean, one of the big driving forces as a prosecutor is you don't ever want to make a decision that then comes back to haunt you. I mean, that is a large factor of what motivates prosecutors and what they do is they don't ever want to give this person a deal to get, cut them some slack and then read about them in the paper in a couple of weeks doing something like that again or worse. So I can fully place myself in the position of those prosecutors and just wildly objecting to these types of injuries and this person being granted probation and the judge doing that over their objections. And I am, as I sit here, trying to think of a time where I ever saw it as egregious as we're hearing right now. I feel like most judges, all you would have to say is, Your Honor, this was a toddler, a child under the age of 1, and they are in the hospital because of what this man did. And I feel like most judges will go, nothing else needed. My offer is what the prosecution's offering. We're not going to entertain this anymore. I'm appalled. I don't know any more about it. And so if I'm way off base here, I apologize. But from what we know, it's appalling.
Wow. Yeah, no question about that. Well, Josh, thank you so much for spending some time with us here today. We really appreciate your time and expertise. It's been really fun, speaking with you about these cases.
No, I've thoroughly enjoyed this. Thank you guys so much for having me.
And just one more quick question. I want to be respectful of your time, but you can email the pros and cons, maybe 5 each. I'm in the market, so a Shark or a Dyson vacuum. So whatever one you're
absolutely
leaning toward. I want to make an informed, educated decision.
I've got a whole newsletter. I'll send that to you. So
I don't know why I'm not on it already.
Thank you very much for listening. It is tough subject matter, but we do want to make sure we keep following Emmanuel's story. Thanks a lot for sticking with us. We'll be back with new episodes next week. And if you're listening to this on the Missing Emmanuel Haro podcast feed, please consider subscribing to the Missing podcast. That's us, and we've got new episodes every week.